I have never been a huge believer in the supernatural, but I'm not closed-minded either. It's just I have never had an experience of my own. That is, until one night in early December of 2016. I was 16 at the time and was doing what I love best. That is, hunting with my father and grandfather. I had been an avid hunter since my dad brought me my first hunting license when I was just a mere age of 7. Throughout my life I have hunted all kinds of game, from pheasants and turkeys, bears and foxes, to deer and elk. So it's safe to say, I am very familiar with the wildlife all over the United States. This particular encounter took place on my grandparents' property in southern Maine. They own 55 acres of land with a small river that runs through the southwest corner of the property. However, that time of year, that river is nothing but a mud pit. For a little more detail, the topography of the land is very hilly with steep inclines and deep valleys. The plan for the evening hunt was supposed to be a short one and was only supposed to take 2 to 3 hours. My dad and grandpa were supposed to come from opposite sides of the valley, and I would come down the hill, and we would all meet at the halfway point in the valley and walk out together. The valley was very easy to find, and it was an old logging road and was well marked. The idea was to push deer to each other. We had a late start, so there were only 2.5 hours or so of daylight left by the time I started my solo trek down into the valley. Before I started my hunt, I pulled out my phone and looked at the map of the property. I know, I should be able to walk down the hill without navigation. But I have a huge fear that I'll take a wrong turn and get horribly lost. What scares me most is pissing off my grandfather for making him wait for me at the rendezvous point. So to be safe, I looked at the map. The first part of the hunt started off without a hitch. It was making good time while stopping every once in a while trying to look for a deer sign. So far, there was nothing worth mentioning, but I was happy to be in the woods regardless. Things, however, became really bad really quickly. As I mentioned, there wasn't much daylight left to begin with, so we took that into account. What we didn't take into account was that the storm came in like a bat out of hell with no warning. In an instant, the sky became dark as night, and the snow came down to the point where seeing more than 5 feet in front of you was damn near impossible. I had enough and began to haul my butt to the meeting point at the bottom of the hill. Once I finally reached the level ground, a wave of relief finally fell over me. I was cold, wet, and wanted a hot shower. Then my heart sank. I was not at the old logging road. In fact, I had no idea where I was. Crap. Everything I know about making out of situations like this tells me to stay calm. Forget about that, I am everything but calm. I knew I was down the hill, so I had the hope that my grandfather and dad were somewhere close by. Not even thinking about scaring any deer, I yell out, "Dad! Grandpa!" I took a momentary pause to listen for a response. All that I heard was the wind blowing through the valley and the sound of snowfall. Then I heard something I truly cannot explain. I heard, "Dad! Grandpa!" echoed back to me. What the heck? "Over here!" I yelled back, only to have "Over here!" yelled back to me. This time it was really close. Whatever was echoing me was moving fast. To heck with this, I pulled out my phone to try to call my dad or at least figure out where I am, but of course it was dead. The only thing I was sure of was the fact that I did not want to be in these woods any longer. I figured that if I walk in one direction long enough, I would eventually end up at a house or a road. I must have been walking for close to a half hour with no sign of, well, anything but more woods. The whole way I had an uneasy feeling. It was like something was there, but it wasn't like it was watching me. It felt like it was stalking me. Every time I paused to get my bearings, I could hear the sound of the snow crunching under my footsteps. When I had enough, I called out, "Who's there?" Nothing but the sounds of steps circling me. Then I remember them stopping. I was able to pinpoint where the steps stopped. It was dead ahead of me. I looked out into the woods, and behind a large hemlock I noticed something ducked behind a tree. It was quick, so I couldn't make out any details. But whatever it was tall and skinny, and was thin enough to hide behind a tree without being seen. By this point, I wasn't sure what my next move would be. I was too afraid to move forward to the hemlock. I had no interest in finding out whatever this creature was. I raised my rifle and pulled back the firing pin. I put a round into the tree, and almost instantly I heard the thing take off at warp speed. Thinking I got rid of this thing, I continued walking in the same direction. I thought if I could just get to a road, my dad and grandpa would be looking for me, so I carried on and so did the storm. After another hour or so, with no other issues, I finally stumbled onto a paved street. Now I had to figure out how to contact my dad, so they could come pick me up. That is when I heard it again. "Dad! Grandpa! Over here!" The thing had still been stalking me. I fired off another round into the air, but it had no effect. The creature just kept yelling back to me, and it was getting closer. Once it sounded like it was almost on top of me, it went dead silent. I looked around and heard a welcome sound. It was my dad's truck coming down the road. Thank God. I piled in and began to tell my dad and grandpa everything. When my dad started to drive off, I looked behind me, and through the red glow of the tail light I saw a tall figure duck behind another tree. I, to this day, never figured out what was stalking me in those woods. If anyone has any ideas as to what I encountered, I'm all ears.